So I made it a goal to really build up my freelancing gig so that I could replace my salary and just quit, essentially. Fast forward to January 2017, I have all of these gigs lined up, and I'm like, okay, I think I could actually do this. I think I could quit. But the CEO calls me into his office and he's, hey, we're going through around another layoffs. I'm really sorry, but we have to let you go. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is serendipity because I was just going to quit. I've loved doing copywriting ever since then.
The following is a conversation with Allison Carpio, a freelance copywriter who went from working a 9-to-5 job to traveling Europe while writing for brands like Curology and Bulletproof. As the founder of Morning Hour Co., she helps impact-driven brands bring their stories to life with powerful messaging that expands their reach. In this episode, we discuss how Alison built her business from the ground up, from her early struggles to how she attracts high-paying clients consistently. She shares her lessons and insights for anyone wanting to start their own thriving freelance copywriting career. And now, here's Alison.
Thank you. It's so great to be here. I'm really excited. And it's been a while since I've seen you, Jesse.
I know, we were just talking off camera before I hit record about where we first met, which is 2018, which now, what are we, 2025? So that's how many years?
Well, 6.5, because it was like, I feel like it was in June or July, and we're in January. So it was like 6.5 years ago, we'll say.
And it was funny because I met Alison. I was traveling through South America with my sister. We were in Colombia. And I think it was on a walking tour of the favelas in Colombia in 2018, which was just a random place to meet another copywriter. Like, I think we got chatting on that tour and you were traveling with a friend and said, you also were a copywriter. So I was pleasantly surprised to meet another person like me overseas.
I remember we were so like, oh my gosh, you're a copywriter too. Because, it's not every day you just meet other copywriters out in the wild, especially if you're doing the digital nomad thing. So we were like super excited, and then we stayed in touch, and then the rest is history. And 6.5 years later, here we are.
I've been following your career over social media as we've stayed in touch, and it's amazing to watch how you've evolved over the years and the different things you've been doing. So I'm keen to hear all about that. One of the great benefits of copywriting or freelancing is that it was before COVID, but we were able to travel to work at the same time to enjoy other locations, to be location independent or a digital nomad. And I think that's one of the really benefits is the lifestyle. I'm in Thailand, you're in California, and we can continue to travel and work as we please. So I think that's just one of the great benefits of this lifestyle. I wanted to jump into the first question, Alison, which is what were you doing before you started freelance copywriting, and when did you get started?
I was working in digital marketing at a couple tech startups. I think at the time I was at a company called Kissmetrics. If Neil Patel, he had this software company, and he was pretty well known in the digital marketing space. And he had this analytics tool that wasn't doing so great. Honestly, like the ship was sinking just because you're in these meetings and you're like, numbers aren't looking great. The funding's not really coming in. Not only that, but I had craved wanting to do something outside of this. I knew I was meant for something beyond a cubicle. And even if startups say it's not cubicle, there's something beyond a 9-to-5 job. While I was working at Kissmetrics, it was the fall of 2017. And I had told my employer, Kissmetrics at the time, I was like, hey, I've always been wanting to live abroad, so I'm going to Spain for 3 months. I'd love to still work here. Do you want to keep me? And at the time I did that, I had already had a track record for them. I'd work on some split tests and launches where my copy was very high performing. So I'd really established that trust and had some wins under my belt. And they said yes. I got a taste of that location independent lifestyle. It was September through November in Spain, which is like the best time to be in Europe, in my opinion. It's a beautiful time, a lot of festivals happening. And I was going around to France, Paris, and Marrakesh, Morocco, and everything. So I did that. I loved it. I settled into it. And then I came back and I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. I loved what I did. I want to keep doing that. Even if I'm not doing it back to back, I still just don't want to be back in the office all the time. So I made it a goal to really build up my freelancing gig so that I could replace my salary and just quit, essentially. Fast forward to January 2017, I have all of these gigs lined up and I'm like, okay, I think I could actually do this. I think I could quit. But the CEO calls me and a couple of other my coworkers into his office and he's, hey, we're going through around another layoffs. I'm really sorry, but we have to let you go. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is serendipity because I was just going to quit. So it was
Mhm.
perfect. So I got severance for the rest of the month and I just didn't have to do any more work for my daytime job. And it just all worked out from there. The opportunity was there and I've loved doing copywriting ever since then.
One thing I like about your story is you didn't just jump from one job to the other. You started to get freelance clients by the sounds of it while you were still working at that company. So it makes it a much easier transition. I always caution people that say, I've got a job, should I quit my job and then go and become a copywriter? And unless they have a fair amount of savings or some clients lined up or they're working with clients, I don't recommend just immediately jumping ship into the unknown because it might take a while to get your first couple of clients.
Yeah, exactly. And some people can do that, but I really need that safety net. I had savings, but even then I didn't want to burn through it. I still wanted to have some work lined up so that I wasn't coming off as desperate in my sales calls and I was operating from a place of more abundance.
Hope you're enjoying this episode. I just want to take a moment to tell you about my free guide, which is all about how beginners can start their own freelance copywriting business. I'll put a link to that in the description below. If that interests you, head over to the website now, download the guide, and I'll send it right over to you. Now, let's head back to the episode.
What were some of the challenges that you faced when you first started and what did you do to overcome those?
I thought I only wanted to do fitness copy. And I had this idea that like I have to do just one type of thing and say no to everything else. And I think to an extent that could be true. But when you're first starting out, you want to try different things just to see what you enjoy. And also, if you need to say yes to a client that you typically, that's not like necessarily ideal, like there's no shame in that. We all do it and it's totally okay. It's temporary anyway. And I think there was definitely some times where there was like definitely the feast and famine where maybe I got really comfortable with how many clients I had. I got really comfortable with the retainer clients, but stopped doing like the marketing and business development where that should like never really stop as an entrepreneur or as a freelancer. That's just part of the job. That's just never gonna end. But I think I just stopped and got a little cozy and was like, oh yeah, I've got these retainer clients. But retainer clients can disappear like in a bit. They could reevaluate their budget. They could, have a bad weekend or a bad month and then need to make some budget cuts. You're not a full-time employee, which is great, but it also just means that things could end pretty quickly. I wasn't really thinking ahead in that way in the beginning, but eventually I got some more support. I think like even just trying to do it by myself was always difficult. So I think getting some more support from either peers or mentors or even just like other contractors really made things a lot more easeful and just more fun. And
I've also, in the beginning of my career, struggled with that, the feast and famine cycle. And you hear this online, maybe from me or from you or from other copywriters, that you always want to be marketing yourself and putting yourself out there. Alison, one thing you mentioned was you were doing fitness copywriting. Were you focused on one specific niche in the beginning or were you more, open to all different niches?
I got really laser focused on being the fitness and wellness copywriter that I said no to things initially. But eventually I said yes to, because when you get known for something, people will reach out to you even if they don't fit within that. If they just like your approach, if they've heard good things about you, they'll want to work with you regardless if you're a wellness copywriter or not. I think that really served me in the beginning when I didn't have anything to speak to, when people were like, oh, you're a wellness copywriter. Awesome. I'm a wellness brand. Let's work together. Whereas if I was just like, oh, I'm just any old copywriter, then they're like, oh, who have you worked with in the past? But yeah, eventually I dabbled in different things. I went back to software for a little bit because that was my background, especially as software companies started to see the value in copywriting. Part of the reason why I left was because they just didn't value it as much. So I was going to go over to fitness and wellness because they actually see the value in it. But as that kind of changed, when I got more of those inbound requests, then I started saying yes to that. And then other like D2C brands as well. I dabbled in e-com, wasn't really for me. But now, even though I don't really necessarily only do wellness and fitness, I still get clients coming to me who are fitness and wellness brands. I actually like like last quarter, someone reached out to me on LinkedIn and it was like this really awesome fitness brand. And he's like, hey, I randomly found you on Twitter or X or whatever. And I haven't been on X in 10 years. I don't use that anymore. I don't know how he found me, but he's, yeah, I just wanted to chat with you. We have a website rewrite coming, or like we're relaunching our website. I wanted to see if you could chat. And he was like an amazing guy. We ended up working together. We're going to continue working together. And that was that. I think it was good that I specialized that for a little bit, but I kept my options open as my journey unfolded.
The advice I like to give to beginners is if you have some experience, some knowledge, some specialties from a past career or things you're just passionate about, then it's a good way to use that as your first few portfolio examples because you're already knowledgeable on that topic. But of course, you don't have to be married to a niche forever. You can always switch and change. And if a big client from like an adjacent niche comes along and says, hey, we've got all this money, we did all this copy, you're not going to say, no, I can't. I'm married to one particular niche. So I like the idea of the flexibility and evolving over time. I'm curious to know what you were doing in the beginning. Maybe you could share the story of how you got your first freelance writing client.
As a friend of mine, he was this thought leader in the gamification space, very niche. So I guess I've worked in that niche too. And yeah, I think he knew that I was getting started or I was just like going full time. And then my other friend, who is his business partner, essentially was like, hey, we're doing this crowdfunding campaign. Could you help us with some emails? Because they didn't like to do the writing themselves. So I was like, yeah, sure. And that was my first client. I charged super low because they were my friends. They were my first clients. I didn't know what I was doing. I just wanted the experience. It was a good learning experience. But yeah, that was my very first one. And then from there, I had joined a couple of like communities. I was in Kevin Rogers' Copy Chief for a while. I was in his mastermind where he was referring people to me. I did a lot of speaking, which if we're talking about marketing, speaking was such a huge thing for my career. I was on so many stages and doing a lot of podcasts, things like this that I love doing that are also just like really meaningful for expanding my reach and helping me connect with people that I want to work with. I remember I spoke at this one mastermind in 2018, 2019, and I got so many projects from that, even years later, and they were really big projects too, that I'm just like, oh, wow, it's really that simple. I didn't have to necessarily build this huge social media presence. Although what was funny is that every time I spoke on stage, that would expand and like double my social media presence and my online presence. So I think it was really just a combination of meeting people, building relationships, and doing a lot of that speaking to really connect with people who just really needed my help.
Absolutely. There's a few insights I want to unpack from your very excellent answer, Alison, and that's for your first client, it's often a good idea to tap your existing network, people that already know and trust you, right? And if they're in need of a copywriter, if they're already looking for a copywriter, maybe they're posting online on different job boards or they're asking around, and why not hire their friend or their family member instead than some stranger out there? So it's often a great way of getting your first client, or even if it's for low rates, and I certainly undercharge for my first project as well, at least you gain that valuable experience and the confidence from knowing I can do this. I've had a project already. I've had a client. It can do wonders for your self-confidence and ability to go out there and promote yourself. I also have spoken at different stages, not so much nowadays. I live in Thailand, but while I was living in Australia, coming up in my career, I was invited to share copywriting tips on different stages as well. And it was a huge career booster for me as well. I'm not the most knowledgeable copywriter in the world, nor the most successful one. And I mention that because I think a lot of people think, well, I'm not an expert. I couldn't get up and share copywriting tips. Who am I to do that? And it's really a limiting belief. If you've studied your craft, if you've gotten good results already, there's loads of business owners who would love to get your insights. And so speaking is a fantastic way of promoting yourself and getting clients. And you don't need to be the world's #1 copywriter to do it. It might be going to a local meetup and sharing some copywriting tips. It might be even just networking. The first 10 seminars I went to, I was just another attendee, shaking hands and getting clients that way as well. It's not a strategy for everyone. If you're an introvert, you'd rather be at home with your cats and your computer than out there networking. That's totally fine. But it is an opportunity for people that do sharing their knowledge as well. So thanks for sharing that. It's really valuable. Do you have any other marketing strategies you'd recommend for more introverted type copywriters that may not want to leave the house?
Yeah. Well, to speak, you don't always have to leave the house. I think with a podcast, if you want to do a solo podcast, you could totally do that. You don't have to interact with anyone necessarily. Or if you don't want to, actually, if you give a talk, you're not necessarily interacting with people. Or if you would rather, instead of giving a PowerPoint presentation or Google Slides, whatever, if you just want to have one of your close friends who you're really close with do a fireside chat with you and you're just chatting like this, you could totally do that too. But I will say, they're not introverted. I think like one of my favorite speaking things I ever did was I was invited to be on a panel, and it was like Dreamforce Week for Salesforce, and it was like a sales enablement panel. It was all about like content for sales teams because, I did product marketing, that sales enablement falls into it. And I got invited to be the panel moderator. So all I did was just ask the questions. I didn't even answer any. And at one point I was like, I made my introduction. I was like, hi, I'm Allison Carpio. I'm a product marketing consultant. And I just asked the questions. And then I got a really big project out of that. And I didn't have to really prepare anything. All the questions were already predetermined. I didn't have to really come up with any answers because I wasn't answering the questions. But that was my favorite thing because it was such low effort for me, but like such high reward that I was like, I would love to just moderate more panels. That's really awesome. Maybe not ideal if you're introverted, but if you are introverted, I think if we take away the social interaction from it, what's great about speaking or just showing up on camera or anything like that is really just people get a sense of what you're like to work with, who you are, beyond just reading your words on an email, a social media caption, a blog post kind of thing. So if you could really showcase your vibe and kind of what you're like, whether that's like a podcast where maybe it's just your voice, or making videos or reels or things like that, anything to really just showcase who you are. I think that's really effective. And then what also does, it weeds out the people who maybe just aren't a good fit for you, and you attract the people who you'd be a really good fit for, who would really work well with. If I'm very bubbly and outspoken, I'm probably going to attract people who are really okay with that or that. But if I'm a little bit more calm and a little bit more reserved, I might attract people like that too. So I think that's also really good for you, the business owner or the freelancer, to really, qualify people in that way. Because when I think about clients, outside of what product they're selling, what niche they're in, I think about what is our chemistry like. And that's really important for me because I love working with people that I would want to hang out with outside of working together. That to me has been really important. I think whether you're introverted, you're extroverted, you're ambiverted, whatever, I think it's definitely worth investing some time and effort into.
100%. And I love that idea of you could jump on podcasts, you could record your own podcast. Technology has come such a long way since when I first started. And social media is such a big thing for marketing. There's really no excuse not to, make some content to promote your own services as well. And I think the more places you can show up in front of your ideal clients, whether that's in SaaS or in other technology or whatever your niche may be, you can just be visible to them as opposed to invisible because you don't put yourself out there. The more visible you can be to your potential clients, not to the whole world, the more likely they're going to reach out to you when they need someone like you to write for their business. So I think that's really valuable advice. And that could be in whatever way that works for you. Everyone's obviously going to be different. I want to ask you, Alison, about charging. A lot of aspiring copywriters or even beginner copywriters, they don't know what to charge. They get what we call price anxiety, where they don't want to charge too much, where the client says, oh, there's no way I can afford that, or too little, where they then resent what they've charged because it doesn't cover their bills. How do you think about pricing, and how for you has pricing evolved over the years?
Yeah, and it's something I'm constantly working on, to be transparent. I haven't fully figured it out. I still need help with it. I have a friend of mine who is she's like a business consultant. She helps with financial planning and stuff. And we're deep diving into all of my offerings and reassessing the pricing just because I need someone else to come look at it for me. But up until now, I've been working on that myself with the help of some mentors. In the beginning, I came up with a number that I felt comfortable with, but I also had an idea what some of my peers were charging too. It was a number that if I said it, I wouldn't totally puke, but I was still a little bit uncomfortable with. So I would just pay attention. If I said this, how does that feel? Like, is my stomach churning? Do I choke when I say that? Am I believable when I say that? Do I even sound confident in that? Or am I selling for my heels essentially? So that evolved a lot. And, as the numbers went higher, like my level of comfort would change a little bit. My puke line, as I call it, would move a little bit. I think as my skills developed too, and as I got more wins and more results, that kind of impacted how I priced as well. Recently, what I have done is I partnered with ChatGPT a little bit because I talk to it about, I brainstorm a lot with my little bot that I've trained so well now, knows a lot about me and my business. So I told it what I'm offering right now, everything that's involved in it, my experience, what I'm charging. And recently I was talking to it about a proposal and I was like, what should I charge here? And it gave me this range and it was like, but you should probably charge at the top end of it. And I was going against it and I was like, no, maybe I should do less. It would counter me. Sure, you can, but you probably should charge higher. And I ended up not charging the highest against ChatGPT's recommendation. And the client was an immediate yes, which I was like, I probably could have charged higher, which is ChatGPT. It was really looking out for me, in all honesty.
Yes.
Which is so funny, but I learned for the next time. So it's always a learning experience every time.
And that kind of is a great transition to my next question about leveraging AI tools like ChatGPT in your work, and if so, how you do it. Before I ask you that question, there seems to be a few different camps of people when they think about AI tools. The first one is, I never use them. Like my father, he's an author. And he says, I don't want to know about, never want to use them. Only a human should do the writing. Then there's other people that say, it's a threat to my job. They're scared of it. They're worried about it replacing them. And then there's people that embrace it, like you and I do. We embrace these new tools. How are you using AI in your copywriting workflow? It sounds like you're using it for your own business coach when it comes to pricing, like figuring out what should I charge for this project? How else are you using it in your work?
Yeah, I'm using it. I'm not always listening to it, but now I know what to listen to a little. I use it a lot actually for messaging. With a more recent project, I had all of this research. Well, first of all, it helps me research. So I'll ask it, what are some competitors to this brand I'm working with, feed it a lot of the materials that my client gave me. And I even had a transcript of an interview I had with my client about the product. And I fed it the transcript and I was like, can you help me come up with some pillars? I think it's around this, but can you help me crystallize that and develop it a little bit more? In my projects, I usually create some kind of messaging framework that's useful for the marketers, any other copywriters they work with, any designers or anyone they work with, anyone who's onboarding. One, because it helps me write the copy. If I have the messaging down, then the copy is just going to be easier. But two, it also helps drive my prices a little bit higher. And if I work with them even more, then I have that foundation and I can pretty much write anything about that product. So I use ChatGPT to really crystallize what that messaging was and get really clear on that. It didn't always get it right. I treat it as a thought partner. I used to use AI as, hey, do this for me. And I was always so fed up with the results. And I thought maybe I'm just not instructing it well enough. Probably true. But when I thought of it more as a thought partner and we iterated things along the way, I kept giving it feedback. It would ask me questions. I would ask it questions. I would be very candid with my feedback. The output got so much more useful to me. that I trained it so well that it's become very invaluable to the point where I don't even want to switch tools. I'm like, well, I trained this one so well. It's my other employee. I use it for messaging. I use it for research. Perplexity.ai is really great for research. You just ask it questions and it gives you all of these sources. So you can always double check the sources in case you're like, I don't know about that. But also for brainstorming things as well. Sometimes I use it as a sales coach. Like, for example, this one client said that they wanted to, like they had mentioned like in the past about like having future projects. So I thought, okay, well, this client said they have some future projects. Can you help me write an email about following up on that and how to approach that conversation? Or can you help me prepare for this sales call? Can you help me write this proposal, which they've written me so many proposals and so many scopes of work that I don't want to do anymore. So they've come up with templates for that, really guided me in different directions for driving sales pipeline. But even when it comes to brainstorming marketing and lead gen strategies, or when I came up with this new quiz I have, like it helped me with the quiz idea or even writing the quiz, which I used to do from scratch by myself. And that was like one of my specialties, and it just did it like so much easier. But that's because I knew what the questions to ask and I knew how to give it feedback and I knew what direction to guide it in. I don't think AI is ever going to replace humans because it needs human guidance and human feedback to do its job. What the output I get from AI is going to be very different from someone else just because we're different people. But it's been really helpful for me in like cutting down a lot of the things I don't want to do or the things that have been very manual or just really expanding my thinking. So I use it in many ways, or even just like analyzing data. If I have all these survey responses, I'm like, hey, can you like summarize this? Or I do messaging sessions, like deep dives that's an hour and a half. We're going through and we're like trying to figure out what our value props are. I'll just take the transcript and my notes and I'll feed it to it. And I was like, can you summarize this? And it becomes a deliverable for the client. That saved me a couple of hours of sifting through all that myself and then creating a doc myself. It's like my other little employee or employees, so to speak.
I like to think about AI and ChatGPT, which I also use every day, is as like a junior writing assistant who's sitting alongside me. And instead of someone replacing me, it's just a really smart assistant. And I still need to give it the idea. I still need to train it like you would train an assistant. You don't get a new assistant and you say, all right, do all these tasks for me. You have to train them if they're going to know what they're doing and to do it in the way you like. So I love that you spent the time on training your AI assistant and that you're getting value from it. I don't believe it replaces us. I think just like an accountant with a calculator or a carpenter with a nail gun, it's just really helpful technology. But you still need to know how to build a house or to make the right calculations. It's a tool that you need to operate or a person you need to instruct, not someone that's going to replace you. And that's how I like to think about it. What would you say to writers out there that are worried that AI is just stealing all of the copywriting jobs and it's going to replace all of us? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think it's funny because it's obvious when a non-marketer or a non-copywriter just fed something AI, slapped it on a website or on a landing page. And I think customers are smart about that too. And I think business owners are pretty privy to that. So they're not going to just think, oh, copywriters are like a dime a dozen, or I don't need one, I just have AI, unless they are a savvy copywriter themselves. So I think it's something worth embracing. It just makes you that much better. People will want to work with you because they value the way that you think. They just really like you as a person. They value your experiences. AI doesn't have the same experiences you have. They just need some guidance from you. I don't think it's ever going to replace us. I think it's just going to replace really mundane jobs that probably needed to be automated anyway. If you think of marketing automation systems, people used to do that very manually, but now it's automated, but someone still has to manage it. And even managing it requires so much human work and so much human time too. And I feel like copywriting is the same way, especially because, for example, on go-to-market teams, sometimes the market is changing very rapidly and AI doesn't necessarily know that. And it needs that guidance and that input from you of, hey, this just happened. How can we pivot our positioning and our messaging and all of our copy because this happened? It's a thought partner. We can collaborate together. And since then, the quality of the deliverables and the things I've gotten has been so much better. To put into perspective though, like for things like telling stories, it's never going to replace that. It's always going to need our help. It can't really replace the artistic mind. AI is technology. It's really just helping with the science of it, especially the science that you find boring. So definitely use that to your advantage. And my whole goal is just to work with more ease and do a lot less with more impact. And I think AI is really helpful for that. It would be silly for me to not embrace that.
This is another perhaps interesting question for the audience is, do clients ever ask you if you use AI tools, and how would you respond to that?
No one's ever asked me, but they know that they use it themselves, so it's not a big deal. I did have a client that was like, he implied, if you use it, I would be proud to know that you're using it. I'm glad that you're embracing that. I've had some AI clients too, so I have to be using AI or else they'd be like, what are you doing? But no one's ever asked, did you use AI to write this? But there were times where I created one of the headlines and I chose it and they were like, I love this headline. It just speaks to that. It doesn't matter if I wrote it myself or if AI wrote it. Like I chose it, I selected it out of the 10 headlines that it wrote, and that's what matters. And that's where the human input comes in, because someone else might choose headline number 4, but I chose headline number 2 and the client loved headline number 2, but it might not have loved headline number 4. So that's where it's not, you're not necessarily outsourcing everything to AI, like you're working alongside with it.
I want to move on and talk about the future. So we're now in 2025, it's January. And I'm just wondering, what do you think some of the most important skills for 2025 if someone wanted to start copywriting this year? What would you recommend they focus on in terms of developing their skills, their confidence to be a freelance copywriter today?
I think outside of leveraging AI, I would
Yeah,
say it's
obviously.
really, I'd say it's really building that personal brand, really getting visible, putting yourself out there, recording videos, recording podcasts, really getting clear on why you're doing this and what do you want to bring into the world. I know for me right now, I've very much evolved so much. I used to be so much in the direct response world, and then I learned a lot of brand copywriting, and now I could actually bridge both of them together. You can have that conversion copywriting skills that I bring, but also very much be aligned with the brand and with not just the brand voice, but like the brand values and the mission that's behind the brand. So I think one of the reasons why a lot of people work with me is because I can bring those two together and you get the best of both worlds there. So I think it's like really, when I think about personal branding, like I also think about what really makes you unique and what are the special gifts you want to bring into the world. And if you can get really clear on that and really make that very visible and become known for that, whether you're speaking, whether you create a podcast, whether you're creating videos, whether you're networking and just building those relationships, I think that's going to be very, very helpful. I think building relationships is such a good skill to have for many reasons. One, it makes business a lot more fun. Like I collaborate with my friends all the time. One of my good friends hosted a business retreat in Mexico City last year, and she asked me to do a workshop there. And I wanted to attend anyway, but like me getting to run a workshop there was just like, it was so much fun. Like I got to go as a speaker. I got to really work with the people there, and it was amazing. I also have this brand designer who's a friend of mine too, and she's working on redoing my brand. I'm going to be relaunching my brand very soon, and I love working with her. She's a good friend of mine too, and it's just a lot of fun. But also, I think it's going to be helpful in terms of partnerships. You and I met 6.5 years ago or something, and here we are now, like doing this video podcast, and it's a lot of fun. And this happened because we met, we started to chat, and we stayed in touch for a really long time. And that enabled this to happen. And a lot of the speaking gigs that I've gotten were because of different relationships I've had. But also a lot of clients that I've gotten were because of relationships I've had too, whether people were referring me, whether people just knew me. Like I work with one of my really good friends right now. I'm helping her with her launches, with her go-to-market, and with her messaging. So I think as we're now out of COVID, even though people are still getting COVID, we're out of quarantine, building those relationships, really meeting people and like maintaining those relationships, I think is just so invaluable in business, in marketing, in copywriting, just in general.
Relationships are so important, yeah, for our own happiness, but also for client building is a great side effect. And I think so many different studies have shown that the biggest source of clients for copywriters is often referrals. And referrals happen because someone knows you enough to trust you to refer someone else and recommend you to someone else, right? And that often comes about through relationships. And that could be meeting someone at a seminar. It could be meeting someone in a favela while you're in Colombia on a walking tour. It could mean meeting someone online. It could mean inviting another freelancer in your area. Maybe you've seen them on social media, you live in the same suburb, invite them out for coffee. And then maybe after getting to know them, maybe a few months later, they refer a client to you. The more people we know, I often believe it's not what you know, it's who you know. So many opportunities come through because you've met someone and they trust you, as opposed to sending a cold email to someone that's never met you, doesn't know you, and for all those reasons. So I love that idea. And I think relationships are never going to change, even though as technology kind of stampedes ahead and we get all these amazing tools and updates, people still want to interact with other people. We're in a loneliness epidemic around the world, and the more people we can meet and interact with, it feels great, but also great at expanding your business indirectly. Is on, if you were starting out today as a freelance copywriter, knowing what you know now, all the amazing insights and experiences you've had, what would you recommend they do to get started?
I would say don't be afraid to have a voice and build your thought leadership. Whether you're posting on LinkedIn, whether you're creating YouTube videos, or if you're creating a podcast, everyone has a unique perspective. And even if you're a beginner, people love to follow along on the journey. And if maybe your angle is people are learning with you, or you're just sharing what you've learned along the way, or you're interviewing other people. But regardless, I think it's really important for you to really, really hone in on your voice, your unique perspective, and really step into that thought leadership, because people are going to work with you, and though they're going to really align with the way that you think. I remember someone wanted to work with me when I was on that panel. They were like, "Oh, I just really like the way you think," even though I didn't really say what I thought very much. I was just on that panel, just like fielding questions to people. And I think what that meant was she just really liked what I was like and what my vibe was and my energy and all that stuff. And I think that's really important to really put out there. You don't have to be a certain level or whatever to build your thought leadership. You can do it right now, even as a beginner, as you're learning. So it's never too early to start. In fact, you just want to start now and take little baby steps. And you never know who you're going to impact, whether it's now or if it's years later. That one client who reached out to me from some Twitter posts from 10 years ago, back when Twitter was still Twitter. So you just really never know. Things live on the internet for a long time, which can very much be to our advantage. I'd say that. I'd say also really follow what brings you joy and what gives you life. I think there were so many times where I was doing things and I was offering things because my mentor said that it was a good idea and because I was good at it and people wanted it. But at the end of the day, like, I have to really enjoy it for it to be sustainable for me, for me to do my best work too. So really pay attention to if it's something that you enjoy, because I think following your joy is just going to attract the right people to you. It's going to let you do your best work, which will eventually help you charge even better prices, which is definitely what you want, and get more of those projects.
I love that idea. And I think the more you enjoy your work and the people you work with, the better outcomes it is in the copy you write, in the relationships you have and continue to have. I've had clients that have hired me for many years. And when I've asked them about our relationship, they said, the reason I like working with you is you're so easy to work with and we have a great time working together. And that's almost just as important as the copy you write, because if you don't like working with someone, no matter how great they are, you might go back to them, but it probably won't be a long-lasting relationship. I like that. Relationships are so important, but also the relationship with yourself. You've got to enjoy the work you're doing, I think, to continue to want to do it. Exactly. And so being mindful about the projects you choose as well. Great advice there, Alison. I want to wrap this up and say, for people that have been watching and enjoying this conversation, where can people find out more about you, Alison? Where should they go to find out more?
Yeah, so head on over to AllisonCarpio.com. I'm sure it'll be in the show notes here. That's also my handle on Instagram. So it's just my full name, Allison Carpio on Instagram. Come say hi. I'd love to hear what you thought, or if you have any questions, just find my DMs. I love chatting with people who have listened to any of these little interviews because I love hearing who's on the other end too. So go ahead and let's stay in touch. I'd love to hear from you.
Alison, thank you so much for being here, for giving your time. I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Thank you. Maybe I'll see you somewhere else in the world.
Yes, I hope so.
Thanks for having me.